everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Life After Kids with Drs. Brooke and Lynn. I'm Dr. Brooke.
And I'm Dr. Lynn.
Thank you for joining us, ladies. We're so glad you're here today.
Yeah, we're having a great conversation. You know, one of the tools that we use that's been very helpful for us in our friendship, in our lives, just a self-awareness tool, has been the Enneagram.
Yeah.
Many of you guys know what that is and what your Enneagram type is. If you don't, stay with us, because we're going to have a really practical conversation about not just on Enneagram, but about fear and what that really does look like for an Enneagram number 6, which I've got one sitting next to me. Many of you guys have experienced a good amount of fear, and it's kept you back from doing things in life. You know who you are. You're sitting out there, you're listening to this. And, you know, to really know about this, I think that you would say that it's been a very freeing, been a very healing, important piece of self-awareness that has helped you to rise above the fear and live your life.
Yes, I would say that for sure. I think that knowing, like, when I was introduced to Enneagram and learning more about it, and, you know, there's 9 numbers on the Enneagram. We've talked about this before. Each number relates to something different. 6 is a loyalist and also tends towards fear and anxiety, right? For various reasons. And so it was helpful to read that and just connect and go, oh, like this, there's nothing wrong with me. It's just, I'm wired to be more prone to those things. And when you realize that, now you can sort of, I think, at least for me, like, understand myself a little bit better, be a little more forgiving with myself, and then go, okay, well, what can I do to put things in place to help me overcome, you know, fear and anxiety? Right. Now, I would love to extend this conversation beyond the Enneagram and talk specifically about fear, because you don't have to be an Enneagram 6 to experience fear. We all at one time or another have experienced fear. And I think that fear, above anything else, I would venture to say, can hold us back from accomplishing what we want to, from living a more joyful life, from connecting with others the way we want to, from being the mother, the wife, the friend that we want to, from being our true selves. I mean, at the end of the day, at the root of so many of those things, it's fear that holds us back, whether that's fear of trying something new, fear of failure, fear of rejection, fear of not being good enough, fear that something bad's going to happen. Whatever it is, it goes back to fear. And if we're living in a place of fear, we can't also be living in a place of meaning and vibrancy and purpose.
Love that. Yeah.
So I think, you know, this is a really important conversation, is that, number one, I think we need to realize that we all experience fear from time to time, and there's nothing wrong with that. It doesn't make you a weak person.
I mean, fear is a survival instinct, right? So your brain will, going back generations, if you're around the watering hole, you're cooking your meal as a prehistoric human or whatever you think.
You're going way
back, but one of our primal ancestors, let's just stay there, that bodily, the reaction, if we're going to be chased or if there's a threat made, we will have a physical reaction. And then your brain, in its primitive centers, will capture those memories for you for later, because it wants you to say, okay, well, last time we were at that watering hole, the tiger snuck up on us. So what are you going to worry about next time?
Yeah.
Right. And so the problem is when we're in a constant state of fear, we're replaying those memories, but it's irrational fear at times. And then it's, how do you get back into balance with being aware and making, smart decisions, and then, but yet taking risks and putting yourself out there and not being held back.
Yeah. There's a balance of both. I mean, fear can definitely be a protective mechanism, right? And sometimes we need to have a little bit of fear. Sometimes I wish my teens and young adults had a little tiny bit more fear. But it also can really hinder us. And so, being self-aware and understanding that, and I think also just understanding, like, how physiologically your brain works when you encounter fear, because that can lead to, for many of us, especially in this phase of life, like anxiety and even to an extent panic attacks, right? because we start this ramped up, to your point, our nervous system is there, the fight or flight is there from back in the day when we were being chased by a bear to tell our bodies to run. So now the heart rate comes up, we start sweating, we can't catch our breath, we've got to get moving, which was good then to protect us. But now if you're just going day to day and things trigger you, like I've got to, whatever it is, thinking about starting a new job, or you need to, whatever, if you're doing, I don't know, some of us maybe public speaking, whatever it is that you would be doing can trigger those pathways, and realizing that, what it is, that it's your nervous system ramping up. And for some of us, for me, I'll have those things come on for what seems like sometimes no reason at all. And realizing that there's nothing wrong in those situations. Your nervous system is ramped up. It's causing your heart to race a little bit. You're starting to sweat a little bit, and you are okay. You're just in a place of distress.
You're caught in a loop, in a limbic system loop, which is much more your primitive part of your brain than it is your cortical centers. And, how do you break out of that? You break out of that by going to the cortex and thinking above that. Right. And it's like that for a lot of other primitive emotions, not just fear, but so the Enneagram 6, I love the word you use. It's a place of understanding. Right. So coming from a place of understanding, because when you know more, you know better, you do better. Yeah. And so a part of that Enneagram can be that piece to come in and wrap around, like, here is a behavior, here's how I'm a little bit predisposed, and you need to do a little bit even more. Yeah. Pre-work, right? Or work to circumvent that. And
by the way, we should also say that you may deal with anxiety or high levels of stress or fear. That doesn't make you an Enneagram 6. There are plenty of other numbers on the Enneagram and other different personality types that struggle with anxiety too. It might just be over different things, right? So just throwing that out there, anxiety, is not just a personality type. It would be silly to try to make it seem that simple. Yeah. There are so many different aspects and things that come up with anxiety. But anyway, that being said, let's talk specifically about some of the things that I have learned about myself and figured out that are very helpful coming from a place. And by the way, Enneagram 6, go figure, is said by a lot of people that are experts in the area to be the most common number, which is no surprise because so many of us do operate on that. Like, we're like the worst case scenario people. Like, we live in this constant state of seeing a situation and thinking every single thing that could possibly go wrong and then being prepared for it. Right. Or trying to be prepared of it, because what you're seeking, and very often when it comes to fear and with Enneagram 6, what you're seeking is certainty and safety. Right. You want to be safe. You want to be certain that you are safe in the world. Yeah. Right. And how that play, I think for somebody that deals with anxiety, that's at the heart of all of my life, is I want to feel secure. I want to be certain. I want to feel safe. And I've had so many times where I feel like, and even just recently, something that came up with Anthony is because he was going to college. I had like a major flub up that I won't get into right now because it's personal, but I just walked away from that in tears. And I just said, God, like, I was praying, like, what can I learn from this? What can I learn from this? Like, backstep from the struggle, from this mistake? There's got to be a lesson in here. And what I felt so clearly to my bones was, you are not in control. You cannot be certain about everything. You have to have a certain amount of faith. And that was like, not a certain amount. You have to have faith. You have to trust. You have to trust me.
Yeah. Interesting.
You can. And I was like, that hit me so hard because that's where I operate from. Like, I always want to be certain. I always want to know that I'm in control. Yeah. That's why I don't like, why I don't like to be on a plane. I don't know what's going on in there. I want to go in the cockpit so I can be sure. I'd be in there telling them what to do. No, I wouldn't. But you know what I mean? Like,
you'd be asking them, are you sure you know what to do?
Right. Cause I don't know what I'm doing. And I'm not the person that.
So, anyway. I'm in Enneagram 1, and some of you guys may be different numbers, but what I just got from that is that, for me, perfectionism and that like childhood message is that when you're good and perfect, when you're good enough, when you're perfect enough, you will receive love. So your childhood message is what? You're
wanting safety. Yeah. You want to be safe in the world.
Yeah.
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 And that's a difficult task because you're never going to be entirely certain or safe. And you can get really wrapped up in unproductive thinking for a 6, where you're just in your brain and you're thinking, but it's not productive. Right? So you're just it's not getting you anywhere. In fact, it's making situations worse because you just can't get off of whatever it is. Now, the good news is, and funny enough, is that if there ever is an emergency situation that actually arises, you're typically the one that's most prepared because you thought about it so many times.
That's a great point.
And it's happened to me in the past where I remember when the kids were little, I was at work. We were still living in Pennsylvania and a tornado came through and I had a patient walk in and they were like, "Did you know there's a tornado?" And I was like, "Oh, really?" Like, I didn't think anything of it. He's like, "No, seriously, like I could see it, like the tornado is." And I was like, "What?" And then my dad walked in, who I was working with him at the time. He's like, "Don't panic, but there's a tornado in your neighborhood." And I was like, what do you mean? Like, if I was thinking about it in my head, I would have been flipping out. Like I would have been making something up. But I was very like, "Well, what do you mean?" And he was like, "Well, there's a tornado in the area and my boys were at home with a babysitter." And I was like, "Okay, like how close is it? Let me get on the phone with Brittany. Let me tell them to get to the basement." And I never once I had every
Oh.
single step in that moment. And my husband always teases with me. He's like, "You're worried about a million things that never go wrong. And when something does, you are the person that's like, this is what we're doing. And here's what we have to do."
Yeah,
It's
the plan.
crazy. But a lot of people will joke about that with an Enneagram 6. They've spent so much time thinking through the things that if something happens, they know what to do. It's crazy.
Wow. So that's what you do with your free time. In the meantime, I'm like, just, yeah, there's a lot. We all have that mental chatter, but I'm trying to think that I definitely, that was, I don't think about that.
Yeah. Well, and I would imagine though that you can have a certain amount of anxiety too around. That's why I say it's not just for an Enneagram 6. You can have a lot of anxiety and get wrapped up in like anxious about it not being perfect or not getting it done right or like,
Yeah. You just,
I mean, that's fear too.
right. Yeah.
So we all struggle with fear in one way or another. I would say like an Enneagram 3, who is the performer, has fear of rejection
right. Yeah.
at a higher level.
Yeah. Of unveiling themselves, their true
Right.
selves.
Of
Yeah.
letting people know who they are,
Yeah.
fear of not being liked for who they
Yeah.
are. So there's so many different levels of fear, but I think this is such an important conversation once again because it can handicap us and keep us from doing what we want to set out to do in this and the rest of the life that we get to live,
Yeah. I mean, you're somebody who I've watched, really become conscious of that since the Enneagram and since just having to, it's was in your face and you had to deal with it.
Yeah.
But then you actively chose, as you got a little bit older, you actively choose not to let fear hold you back. So I remember when you were younger, you would drive, right? Because you don't love to fly because of the whole situation
Yeah.
you just explained. And, and then later in life, what I respect and admire about you is, and maybe some of this had its hand in it, is you know that and you're aware of it, but you have adopted strategies to help with that comfortable feeling, those uncomfortable feelings that come from being out of control or having the fear, not feeling secure. And then you choose the life living lesson or the activity instead.
Yeah. What you can do. And sometimes I just have to do it scared.
Yeah.
Yeah. Like I definitely have many moments in my life where I am anxious or nervous or whatever it is, but I'm doing it anyway.
Yeah.
Because I just refuse to let fear get the best of me.
I love that.
And that can be as simple as something like I tend to have anxiety when I'm in a car, when I'm in a grocery store. I'm not going to stop doing those things. Like
Right.
I force myself to, it'd be very easy for me to have the groceries delivered all the time, which I do often just be out of convenience, but and usually I don't feel great when I'm in the grocery store, but I force my way through it. And also like for anyone listening to this, dealing with anxiety, like for me, it doesn't fully, like it can rear its head at the weirdest times, just all of the emotional stuff I deal with. And there are days where I want to say like, oh, I'm just like, why, like so many times been like, why me? Like, why can't my brain just like be not thinking about this stuff, not be worried about, not be so stressed out? Why do I have to work so hard about stress? This is just like too hard. I go to those places, but then I have to like turn a switch and say, this is the way you were made. You are not getting out of it. There is no switch you can flip. There is no quick fix. So are you gonna like whine and be miserable about it? Or are you gonna get on with your life and figure out how to handle it the best way and do your best to see it as a gift?
Yeah, that's a great little pep talk. I mean, we talk about that often. It's like it's okay to have like a pity party um for yourself for a moment. Um and feel all those feelings, but then you can't stay there.
No.
No.
No, you can't. And I think there's a lot of blessings in struggle too, because for me, like what I deal with, the way my brain works and the stress levels that I get to and the anxiety that I get to, it's forced me. And we talked about, our weight management episode and eating and how I stay away from gluten. Gluten is a trigger for me. And you may not be aware, but if you
Not an
deal
emotional trigger, a physical trigger for emotional issues.
Yes, it's not a trigger like that. It causes me anxiety. Thank you for clarifying that. But I know that it's inflammatory to me. It's inflammatory to my brain. And I do not feel good when I eat it. I have to steer clear. I'm the person that has to be super stringent with my workouts, with my stress management, with what I eat. And in a way, I can look at that as a gift, right? Because I can't just let it, otherwise I'm not functioning as well as I can.
Yeah.
Even though there are days where I'd be like, I wish I didn't have to deal with this, but it is what it is.
So on the other side of that, could you take that too far? And
Yes,
that could be
I know
the
where you're going.
crutch. That could be the crutch where you're trying to get the control by being so disciplined and doing
You
all these
obsess
things.
over that.
Well, yeah, it's a healthier way to direct it,
Yeah.
but you direct it into that, and then that's your way that you feel in control.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. Oh, and I've been there too. And I think you helped me through that, where I was like at a place where I was like, so it was almost like a compulsion that I can't, oh my gosh, I can't touch that because something might happen. And then you get obsessive over what you're eating, which is not healthy at all if you're somebody that's doing that. Like, seek professional help or seek somebody that can help you with that. So there are many layers to it, but once again, we are built in a way, some of our genetic components, some of our makeup, it is what it is, some of our personality type. And the more we learn about those things, the better we can be equipped to navigate it and to rise above it and be the best version of ourselves in the midst of our makeup.
Yeah.
Right.
I love that.
Because I've been dealing, like, it's not going away. So how do you work through that? And for sure, the work with the Enneagram, if nothing else, it's given me some really good tools to work through fear and some anxiety. So that's been great. And we can talk about those if you would like.
Yeah, let's do it.
So some of my favorites, and we talked about this around Thanksgiving, but practicing gratitudes. And it's so true, like, because again, you can't be in a state of gratitude and fear at the same time. And we've harped on this before, but it's such a simple thing. But if I get to a place where I'm just feeling overwhelmed or anxious or fearful, like taking a step back and what do I have to be grateful for today? And if you can do that, and I like anyone else, can have a tendency to get lax on stuff when you're in a really good place. And then your body or your mind reminds you, like, you've got to stick with it. So getting back to those things and doing them proactively, doing them when you feel good, right?
Yeah.
And making it a daily practice, because then you're training yourself to see the things that you can be grateful for. So that's one. Self-affirmations. And I think we've talked about this as a Enneagram 1 too. Right?
Yeah.
Like self-affirmations, reminding yourself that, because like you were saying with the Enneagram 1, you're seeking to be good enough. So affirmations where you're telling yourself
enough. Yep.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So that's that has been great for me too. And I very rarely miss those unless I'm traveling. My husband and my kids, they can hear me doing them. We've talked about this, but I get on my rebounder every morning and I have a series of, it's just self-affirmations, phrases, positive things that I speak over myself. I speak over my life and just remind myself, and I say them out loud. I say them when I'm moving my body. That's a huge help.
It's great.
Meditation. I don't spend enough time doing it, but I think the problem with not a problem. That's a horrible way to say it. But with an Enneagram 6,
The thing to know.
You're in your mind so much. You're constantly thinking and spiraling and thinking. So the more you can practice moments of quieting your mind or getting into a quiet place and just letting your thoughts, being aware of your thoughts, but not reacting to them. so key and so important, Um, oh, you got a delivery. That is so important. Journaling. Journaling is a great way for somebody who is in their mind way too much, fearful, to get everything that's in your mind and
Out.
process it and get it
Yeah.
out.
So important.
Oh my gosh, it's huge. And I've gotten away from that too, and I probably need to step that up. But this is something that you can do daily. It's a great thing to do in the morning. It's a great thing if you struggle falling asleep because your mind's spinning. It's a great thing to do at night before you go to bed to get all of those anxious
Put it
thoughts
all
out.
on the paper.
Yeah, there's a really great thing if you struggle to get to sleep at night, or you wake up at the night with your mind reeling, is sit down, keep a journal beside your bed or a notebook, and just write down everything that's on your mind. You don't pick the paper up. You don't
Just
worry about,
free
don't
form.
pick up the pen. Just keep writing and writing. Don't worry about punctuation. Just write anything that's on your mind, anything that you're worried about. And when you're done, you tear out the piece of paper, rip it up, and throw it away. That's hugely beneficial, right?
Just the symbolic act of that.
If you're comfortable just talking to somebody.
Mhm.
So some of us aren't that comfortable. I'm high when we talk about strength finders. I'm high communication, so it's good for me to speak. And I talk to you, trusted friend. I'll talk to my husband. Some of you may want to see like counselors, whatever that is. There's no shame in that, but being able to speak things and process them, even if you're not necessarily getting feedback from the other person, but just to have someone here that you can
Sounding
speak
board.
it out
Yeah.
loud. If you're not comfortable doing that, then I would say journaling is the next best thing. I mean, it's just has been huge for me. And there are certain things that I get fearful about that build up. And this is another thing when you talk to somebody, and I'm not even speaking about talking to a therapist or a counselor, but just like talking to Ken, who's my husband, has helped me so much in the past. And we may have talked about this before, that like, just talking things out loud and then like laughing about it. Because sometimes when I say what's actually in my brain, I'm like, this is the dumbest, like, what am I even worrying about right now? Like
exactly.
once you hear yourself say it, and then we've had moments where we end up laughing because we're like, he's like, seriously, this is what you're worried about? Like, Brooke, it's just, that's can be hugely, believe it or not, like the more, and once again, laughter, we've talked about this before, it calms your nervous system. So the more you can take whatever script is that's going on in your brain, whatever you're worried about for the day, whether it's your kids or whether it's your safety or your health or whatever that is, it makes a huge difference. I'm trying to think anything else. Is there anything you can think of that I'm missing?
No, I think it's just important to find what works for you, and just that this is information that like you may need to know about yourself. So we do not have an Enneagram quiz, but you've heard the little blurb about taking our Life After Kids quiz. And it that doesn't necessarily take you into an Enneagram, but it gives you some basic information, right? A place to start. This is another place that you could go, like a next level that you could, so start there, and then you can layer it on with new information. And if you've done some self-study on Enneagram, it's one of those things that's sort of like there's a lot of information out there, so it's hard to get an exact from one source. But overarchingly, what you want to focus on is that this is a coping mechanism. This is not just how you're wired. This is the thing that you do, for instance, in the 6th realm, to feel safe, to stay in control, like as you have those thoughts of worst case scenarios playing out in your mind. And if, like you said, if you know that, because otherwise what you're doing is you're sitting there going, what's wrong with me? Right.
Oh my gosh.
And one of the most powerful things you can do for another human is to let them know they're not alone in what they're going through.
Absolutely.
That's empathy. And there are other people. I'm sure it's comforting when you learn that, to know that there are other people like you.
Yeah.
Maybe not exactly, but
yeah,
similar.
Oh yeah. Just knowing that. Well, this is the thing. You start to look into the Enneagram. And when you learn more about it, and we have so much information we can give to the people listening to us, but when you read a description and it almost hits you to a T, you're like, oh my gosh, there's other people that feel and think the same way as me. Or like,
what are these people?
Yeah, like I'm not to your point, like I'm okay. Because sometimes sometimes the worst thing
What's wrong
is
with me?
wondering what's wrong with you, or like that you're not normal, or nobody else is going through what you're going through, or nobody thinks what you think, or
Yeah.
all of those things. And at the end of the day, once again, that's fear. It's fear is at the root of so much. And I think it is women, and at our age, there's just so many things that we dwell on and we're fearful about that we just need to let go of.
It's a waste of time.
It's such a waste of time. It's not productive at all.
No.
And by the way, you can be afraid all you want. It's not going to stop most of the things you're worried about. From most of them aren't going to happen anyway. And if they did, you're not being afraid of it's not going to stop it.
Doesn't. What is it they say that, you know, being worried is like paying rent on a house you may never live in, you know?
Yeah.
A mortgage on a house.
And it's stealing your joy for the day.
Yeah.
So it's not. And once again, as we close, like, remember too, like, keep in mind, as our kids are getting older, they're watching what we do. So, you know, if for no other reason, it's time to start to take the steps that you need. Some of the things we talked about with fear, like the gratitudes, the self-affirmation, the meditation, the journaling, all of these things, take the steps and be proactive so your kids see what you're doing. And they see that, you know, how you can live a vibrant life in this space.
In spite of, or in, you know, not in spite of, because we're all dealt a hand, right?
Yeah.
But making the best of what is your reality, making the best of what is.
100%.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Love it.
So, ladies, once again, thank you so much for joining us today. It's always a pleasure to have you. Make sure you're reaching out to us. Give us your feedback. If you want to hear more about the Enneagram, let us know. We can definitely do more episodes on that, break down the other numbers, and give some action steps for each number. We would be more than happy to do that. Make sure you're following us on Instagram, Facebook, TikTok. The website is www.lifeafterkids.com. Anything else, my dear?
No, just go be amazing.